Welcome back to another episode of CC Top Solutions. I've got great news. Received my first piece of fan mail. It's in relation to the 1970 Cougar that we pulled the transmission out of last weekend. It was actually a really well-written letter. Here, let me share some of it with you. Chris, CC Top Solutions is the greatest channel I have ever seen. But you know what? You can't make this stuff up. This is fantastic. But anyways, it goes on and on for a couple pages about how excellent not only the channel but also the host is. And then it gets into the meat and potatoes of it. Right here. This was a very good question. This is from Crystal Lynn from White Sands, New Mexico. Beautiful area. I saw the movie. Anyway, she says, Chris, I'm a little concerned. In the Cougar, the engine was at about 5,500 RPM and went from 5,500 to 0 in less than one rotation. Is that hard on the bearings? Well, Crystal, that is one heck of a question. Our team researched it throughout the entire week, took a look all over the internet, and couldn't really find a definitive answer. So, what we're going to do is we're going to answer it for you. We're going to pull the engine out of the Cougar, open up the bottom end, and take a look and see, do we have any bearing damage? Because if you think about it, 5,500 to 0, your connecting rod bearings are going to press awfully hard against your crank bearing, against your crank. So I suspect that a couple of them may be wiped or at least damaged. And your main bearings, well, they took quite a beating too when the torque converter wedged and pushed the entire engine forward 4 inches and the transmission backwards a couple inches. So that's what we're going to do this episode. We're going to pull the engine and take a look at the bottom end. I have a sneaky feeling that I might be buying a stroker crank and new bearings. Win-win. We've got our engine out, and I just pulled the intake to see if anything looked bizarre in there. Everything actually looks like it was holding together real nice. You know, the gaskets, I don't see any kind of the usual deformation around here that looked like anything was starting to leak. This all looks like it's sealed real good. So those were good gaskets for this engine. The intake was good. Lifter valley looks pretty clean. I don't see any obviously bent push rods or collapsed lifters or anything like that. So I think we could be all right. I did try hand cranking the engine to see how it sounded, and it sounded fine. All right, I've removed the rockers and push rods on both heads. Everything looks okay, and if you look straight down the row of valves, those all look good. You know, it doesn't look like anything is sunken or bent or anything bizarre. This engine did consume oil. I thought it had to deal with valve guides or bearings. So either way, I'll find out while I'm taking it apart. Next step, we'll pull these heads off. Okay, we got the first head off. Let's take a look at what the inside of this engine looks like. There's our cylinder walls. They look pretty clean. I can still see cross hatching. The pistons, these are aftermarket TRW forged with a pretty deep dish to them. There's the part number for the piston, L2446. I guess I might as well go ahead and pull the other side, see how that looks. So something you really want to make sure you do is you want to make sure you keep your lifters in the order in which they came out. Otherwise you'll wipe a cam lobe when you put it all back together. So the best way to take it out, you see the magnet in the bottom of my drop light? Boop, boop. Look at that, comes right out. And then, once you get it out, you want to make sure you don't contaminate this side. So I don't let that side touch the cardboard. And note how I have, you know, this is a very scientific setup, nothing but the best. It cost $252 on Amazon. back, front. So this way I keep the orientation right. Doesn't get much simpler than that, right? While I'm doing this, I also take a look for wear on all my lifters, make sure they look like they're wearing evenly. This engine has very low mileage, so I'm expecting to see little to no wear on all of these. But you never know. You know, something could have been done wrong during break-in, or maybe I did something wrong. But we choose not to consider that a possibility. And these all look pretty good. All right, now I'm gonna go to the other side and pull those out. It's always incredible how much extra fluid there is in these things, huh? Pulled our oil pan off. Now, bear in mind, this pan was brand new. I've put 1,000 miles on it. And look at what has already built up in the bottom of this. So I don't know what was going on internally with that engine. I do know it was using a lot of oil. Time to take apart the front of the engine. We're gonna pull all that stuff off, and then we're gonna pull our crank out and see if in fact the bearings are eating. We'll answer Crystal Busey's question. Crystal Lynn Busey from New Mexico. The big concerns was because the engine came to a stop so fast, I was a little concerned that maybe the timing chain would have stretched. Well, I mean, here's what we have. So if it's stretched, I don't think it's stretched a whole lot. So we're pulling out our rods and pistons right now. First two cylinders, really, I mean, you can tell this engine has almost no miles on it. Normally there would be like a little bit of a groove here or something, and no, there's nothing. So I'm not sure what to expect. So far, all the bearings that have come out look good. Something to keep in mind while you're doing this, your main caps, they're numbered. So one, front of the engine, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then EE for your rear cap, rear main cap. But anyways, we're gonna keep going down these. Something to keep in mind with your actual rods, these are all numbered as well. And this engine, it's very interesting. These rods, C9AE, so these are 69 rods. This crank, I'm not sure yet what it is. But it does look different, just looking at the level of rust on the crank weights as opposed to the rods. The block is a 72, which is vital for a stroker because 69 to 71, it's a shorter deck height by 20 thousandths. That would be important detail to know if you're going to put a different kit, a stroker kit in here. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and continue pulling these rods off. Here, why don't you guys grab a coffee and enjoy the show? This is all on the wrist. So now these are all loose. The way to actually go a little further. Pro tip, coffee can, perfect parts containers. This way you don't lose any of your hardware. So now these are loose. The way to break them free is you want to use a mallet or something and just hit the threads of that, but you don't have to hammer hard on it, just a little bit, just to break them free. It would appear that there's actually no damage other than, see how there's this chunk of crankshaft taken right out? That was what concerned me, that chunk, there may actually be cracks in the back of the crank. That's the whole reason that I'm replacing this crank. But check this out. If I go ahead and spin it, I don't hear any weird bearing noises, or I mean, it seems to spin nice and easy. And then as far as, our end play, none. I mean, it doesn't seem to move at all. So I think that, for anyone else watching this, if something happens and their transmission seizes and it causes the engine to come to an instantaneous stop, I think this is an illustration that, yeah, that will not destroy your bearings or your bottom end. At least not with a small block Ford. Now we're going to go ahead and pull this crank and see how our main bearings look. looking a little bumpy. That was what was grinding. Woo! Check that out. This is definitely where we were getting our oil consumption. All right, so that's good. We found a smoking gun. I wonder why. I wonder what was going on with that one. Number 1 main bearing was good. Number 2, heavy wear. For unknown reason. Interesting. Things that make you go, It's a little bit of a cheap method to go ahead and break these out. There we go. Come on. There. 3 is good. Oh, look at this though. So I was concerned about this surface from when it all pushed forward. That looks to have some wear as well. So when you're looking at these, right, you got your number 3, this points forward. So it would be sitting like this in the engine. So when it hit in the back, it would have put a lot of force on this thrust surface right here, which really, that actually doesn't look bad at all. It looks fine. It was that number 2 main bearing. That was the one that was really wearing bad. I don't know why. Number 1 main has a little wear, not too bad. 2, this side of the main is fine. The other side is pretty rough. Here's our center bearing that I thought this side would get heavily damaged from the way that transmission failed, but it really doesn't look too bad. So the only main that really was questionable was number 2 on the bottom of the crank. And here's all the mains laid out so you can kind of see how they wore. You can certainly see 2 has way more wear than the rest of them. If anybody knows what might cause that, I am all ears, because that I just find to be very interesting. So something else I learned, by the way, I need to send a little throw out for Thunderhead 289, the YouTube channel. He works on small block Fords a lot. I actually watched his disassembly of a small block Ford last night to see if there's any tips and tricks, which there were. I was very glad that he showed that about, using the mallet to knock the caps loose. And I also watched an Uncle Tony's garage episode, so I'd like to thank him. He showed a way that you can tell if a crankshaft is worn out. And he said basically a crankshaft is a sprung piece of steel. And a real simple test you can do to get an idea of crankshaft health is you just sort of tap on it. See how it springs? So tap on the counterweights, he said. So this one still has some spring to it. So I would say this is actually a healthy crank, but let me show you the damage in the back here. This has been cut 1010, and the fact that this is broken, where the torque converter goes in, it might actually not even matter, just looking at this, but I really didn't want to take the chance. Here we go. Right there, we can actually see where this is broken. Right here, basically the crank is broken all along this outer perimeter. Now my question is if there's any hairline cracks going into there. I would think that there might be. And I would think that that would be something I really wouldn't want to do after I put this beautiful Tremec TKX in the car. So that's why I'm putting the stroker kit in, to just play it safe. And the fact that it had high oil consumption, all the more reason to check this. And when I looked at these bearings and I saw that that number 2 main is in worn condition at best, all the more reason I should be just replacing these things while I have it out. So good deal. I'm going to wrap it up for now. And our next episode, we'll get into some new toys we have. And we'll also look at starting to reassemble this with our stroker kit and putting our Tremec TKX in the car.